A video game needs to keep players fully immersed in its story, characters, and gameplay for potentially dozens, even hundreds of hours without letting the mask slip. But as we've seen so many times over the years, even the best games can't always avoid serving up scenes and moments that feel incredibly out of place. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 most out of place scenes in gaming history. Number 10. Chris Redfield vs. Boulder, Resident Evil 5. As much as the Resident Evil franchise started out with 2 feet firmly planted in the realm of survival horror, it's never really taken itself all that seriously, what with the campy B-movie inspired tone of the earlier games before the shift into Michael Bay on steroids action schlock. Resident Evil 5 might well feature the single most infamous moment of the entire series though, an action beat of such preposterous thigh-slapping absurdity that even the franchise's most permissive, action-hungry fans deemed it a little bit too much. We're talking, of course, about the scene where, during the final battle with Wesker in a volcano, Chris finds himself blocked by a gigantic boulder. A QTE sequence follows, resulting in Chris hilariously punching the boulder until it finally agrees to move out of the way. Even with Chris getting a yoked redesign for the game, it was still absolutely implausible that he'd be able to shift such a large object with his mere fists, leading to widespread ridicule that the series had well and truly, finally, jumped the shark. Despite this, the incident was unexpectedly referenced in the recent 8th main game, Resident Evil Village, where villain Heisenberg referred to Chris as a boulder-punching arsehole. No other moment in the series is more emblematic of its frustrating departure from horror to action, which thankfully has been rectified in recent installments. Even for how generally action-heavy Resident Evil 5 is, this is a sheer cartoon. Number 9. Fithraga's Death, The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion. The Elder Scrolls games are renowned for the richness of their storytelling, characters, and world building, though this is often braced up against some ill-advised tonal choices. This is evidenced in the Mages Guild quest Liberation or Apprehension, where upon entering the Iliad Ruin, you'll come into contact with the one surviving battle mage in the ruin known as Fithraga. Fithraga wants to help the player reach the Necromancer informant, but within seconds of running ahead, poor Fithraga triggers a trap, causing the large stone tile he's standing on to quickly raise upwards into a set of spikes on the ceiling. When the stone column returns to the floor, we're left to observe Fithraga's mangled remains. What should be a shocking and unpleasant moment is actually unintentionally hilarious. The gusto with which he bounds forward only to fall into the most rudimentary of traps is likely to make players consider how truly idiotic the other battle mages must have been for him to be their final surviving one. If Bethesda wanted to instill fear in the player and make them worry about the many hidden dangers within the ruin, this absolutely was not the way to do it. Number 8. Dante and Agnes go full Shakespeare, Devil May Cry 4. Much like their Resident Evil series, Capcom's Devil May Cry franchise doesn't ever take itself particularly seriously. Yet even the action-adventure franchise's trademark goofiness left fans unprepared for the utter unhinged insanity of Devil May Cry 4's 17th mission. This mission sees Dante once again battling Agnes, and the pre-fight cutscene between the two has more theatrical posturing and ridiculous one-liners than your average WWE promo. From the ultra-dramatic poetic line readings to the moody stage-like lighting and haunting music, it feels like we're watching a Shakespeare play, hammered home by the fact that Agnes even literally monologues while holding a damn skull, Hamlet style. If you assume that the cutscene actually informs the character's conflict and subsequent boss fight, think again. This is totally random and never even remotely explained, which really only makes it that much funnier. It's clearly supposed to be funny, but that doesn't make it any less out of place compared to the style and tone of the rest of the game. Number 7. Quiet Dancing in the Rain, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. The first of 2 Hideo Kojima entries on this list, because he's just that damn weird, is from his final contribution to the Metal Gear Solid franchise. Even before the 5th game was released, there was considerable controversy over its depiction of Quiet, the scantily clad female support character who's kitted out in laughably impractical revealing attire for anyone in a combat scenario. Kojima promised players that they would, quote, feel ashamed of their words and deeds once the reason for Quiet's lack of clothing was explained, though fans were largely left unconvinced when it turned out that she breathes and drinks through her skin, hence the amount of flesh showing. It was clearly a half-baked attempt by Kojima to explain away his horny indulgences while giving the game a sexy, eye-catching mascot/cosplay character. And yet, this is really just the tip of the iceberg as the character's portrayal goes. Though Quiet is at least an extremely formidable fighter, Kojima couldn't resist but include a blatant fan service scene that unambiguously reduced her to a sheer sex object. We're talking, of course, about the infamous dancing in the rain scene, which can be triggered by having at least an 80% bond with Quiet while heading back to base from Chapter 2 onward. The scene is exactly what it sounds like. 2 minutes of Quiet stripping down and writhing around amid the pouring rain, all while some ethereal music tries to give the impression it's anything more than a leery, pervy fanservice scene. Kojima's games are admittedly pretty horny in general, but given that you're most likely viewing this sequence moments after completing a high-octane mission, it couldn't feel more out of place. Number 6. Did somebody mention the door to darkness? Kingdom Hearts 2. As a crossover with countless beloved Disney properties, the Kingdom Hearts games are relatively lighthearted for the most part, though do nevertheless take their wildly convoluted lore dead seriously. This results in a multitude of tonally jarring moments that come off much funnier than intended, perhaps most memorably in Kingdom Hearts 2, when King Mickey Mouse sneaks up on Sora and the assembled heroes and asks, "Say fellas, did somebody mention the door to darkness?" Everything about this scene is totally out of place and hilariously wrong. Mickey Mouse ever saying a line like this, his strangely menacing face when he appears in frame, and even the ominous music that plays out for all of 2 seconds. As soon as Sora and company realize it's Mickey, the scene's tone abruptly shifts to one of joy, in what's left fans dying of uncontrollable laughter ever since. Number 5. Spider-Man's QTE fail, Spider-Man 3. If you want conclusive proof of just how far Insomniac's Spider-Man game has brought the character, look no further than the 2007 video game adaptation of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. The game received mixed reviews upon release. Its use of QuickTime events was notably divisive, and more importantly, unintentionally, very funny. The most infamous example occurs in the game's opening tutorial level, when Spidey has to rescue civilians from a burning building and players must take part in a QTE sequence to save a woman strapped to a bomb. However, players who screw up the QTE will be rewarded with a gut-bustingly funny cutscene where the web slinger falls flat on his face before the bug-eyed woman immediately says, "I'm going to die." It's an absolute gift of a scene that lives on today as a meme, but as a serious attempt at conveying mortal peril to the player, it's an absolute car crash. Number 4. Lucas and Carla's sex scene, Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit, aka Indigo Prophecy, was basically a prototype for Quantic Dream's more advanced interactive drama games that followed, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human. The game also suffered through a difficult production, with large chunks of the story's third act being cut due to both time and budgetary constraints. As such, both the more heightened supernatural elements and the love story between protagonists Lucas Kane and Carla Valenti ended up falling rather flat. This culminates in a cringe-worthy sex scene between Straight Arrow cop Carla and a now undead Lucas, which between its hideously awkward visual presentation and Carla's out-of-nowhere declarations of love for Lucas, feels like it belongs in an entirely different game. It's clear that a massive chunk of story and character development was missing, such that basically no attempt was made to sell players on this love story. Even if it were convincing though, that blocky, clumsy sex scene would stick out something fierce. Number 3. Breaking the Fourth Wall, The Evil Within 2. The Evil Within 2 is an improvement upon the first game in a number of ways, though many players nevertheless took umbrage with its unwieldy tonal shifts, vaulting from utter self-seriousness into unexpected goofiness in a moment's notice. The game even dares to shatter the fourth wall to pieces for enterprising players who dare do a little extra exploring. Once you've destroyed antagonist Stefano's paintings, he'll unlock the theater for a direct confrontation. But if you instead backtrack to O'Neill's safe house, you'll unlock a secret cutscene. The scene in question sees Sebastian asking for O'Neill's help, but O'Neill refuses on the grounds that there's evil out there. A frustrated Sebastian replies with the not-so-sly title drop, "That may be, but there's evil within, too," before the pair both awkwardly turn to stare at the camera for a few seconds. It's probably the single silliest moment in the entire game, and the only one that near literally winks at the player about it. It may be tonally out of place, but at least in this case, that's the point, and it's also hidden well enough that only some players would ever find it. Number 2. Mario and Princess Peach, Death Stranding. I am an admitted Death Stranding apologist, and even I have a hard time getting past this one. Hideo Kojima is gaming's crowned king of idiosyncrasy, but even his fans have tolerance limits, as was proven so memorably at the end of his masterful latest release, Death Stranding. When Sam learns that his sister Amelie used herself to convince Sam to link up the chiral network, he sarcastically says, "So I'm Mario and you're Princess Peach." It's a weird meta line for sure, but nothing can quite prepare players for what follows, when Amelie suggests they run home together across the beach. She insists they do it, quote, like Mario and Princess Beach. The toe-curlingly silly one-liner is made even dafter by the sequence that follows, where Sam and Amelie run across the beach in slow motion, set to some hilariously melodramatic music. You could be generous to Kojima and say he's fully aware of the cheeseball factor and leaning into it, but honestly, it feels like we're actually supposed to embrace the melodrama somewhat earnestly here. Whatever your own interpretation, there's little denying that it completely pulls the player out of the moment, whatever the moment is meant to be. Number 1. The Secret Caveman Cameo, Halo 3 ODST. And for our number 1 pick, we've got a scene that's both figuratively and literally out of place, as in, you need to move the camera around during a cutscene just to see it. The Halo series plays itself pretty straight for the most part, though Halo 3 ODST's ending cutscene contains an absurd hidden Easter egg that players can stumble across by toying around with their controller during the scene. As Sergeant Johnson talks to the engineer and insists it's going to tell him everything he needs to know to stop the Covenant, tilt the right thumbstick to the left and the scene will pitch left also, revealing a secret hidden off screen. You'll be able to see teammate Buck stood next to a monkey-like creature before the scene cuts to black. This is clearly a reference to the family of cavemen that can be discovered in Halo 3's mission Sierra 117, each similarly resembling a monkey and bearing the face of Bungie employee Marcus R. Leto. Needless to say, if you accidentally stumbled upon this secret scene by accident, it absolutely destroyed any immersion you had in the central drama unfolding. And that is the end of our list. Do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other incredibly out of place scenes in gaming history. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.